Good evening, everybody, and welcome. My name is Lindsay Engel, and I'm the Vice President Academic and Student Experience here at Red Deer Polytechnic. And I'm so pleased to welcome our students, our faculty, staff, industry partners, and guests, both here in person and joining us online, to the annual Animation and Visual Effects Showcase. This evening is more than a celebration of student work. It is a reflection of what it means to learn, to create, and contribute within a Polytechnic environment. The projects you see represent the integration of artistic vision, technical precision, and sustained effort over multiple years of study. At Red Deer Polytechnic, we are intentional about designing learning experiences that are immersive, applied, and aligned with industry. The Animation and Visual Effects program exemplifies this commitment. Students engage in rigorous, hands-on learning within purpose-built, state-of-the-art labs supported by faculty who bring both academic and industry experience and learning environments that extend seamlessly to online students. In the final year, students work in close collaboration with faculty and industry mentors to develop professional demo reels. These are not simply academic projects. They are career-launching portfolios that position our graduates to enter and contribute to a highly competitive and evolving global industry. As one of the only programs of its kind in Alberta and among a select few in Canada, Animation and Visual Effects at Red Deer Polytechnic reflects our broader institutional role to advance innovation, support creative industries, and prepare graduates who are ready to make an immediate impact. Tonight's showcase offers a window into that impact. It's an opportunity to recognize not only the talent on display, but also the discipline, resilience, and collaboration required to bring these works to life. I'd like to also acknowledge the faculty and staff whose leadership, mentorship, and commitment underpin the strength of this program. Your work enables our students to achieve at a high level and see themselves as emerging professionals. To our students, this evening marks an important milestone. You should be proud of what you have accomplished and the standard you are setting for those who follow. Thank you for being here to support and celebrate this community of learners and creators. It is now my pleasure to invite Dean and Dr. Robbie Hollidan to the stage to provide the land acknowledgement and Dean's remarks. Robbie?
Thank you, Lindsay, and good evening. Red Deer Polytechnic recognizes that we are situated on Treaty 7 territory, traditional home of the Blackfoot, Tsuut'ina, and Stoney Nakoda peoples. And the Central Alberta region we serve falls under Treaty 6 territory, home of the Cree, Métis, and Saulteaux peoples. We honor the first people who have lived here since time immemorial, and we give thanks for the land on which RDP sits. It is here where we will strive to honor and transform our relationships with one another. As we reflect on the land acknowledgement, I want to highlight that storytelling has long been the way in which Indigenous communities have shared knowledge, history, and connection to place. Animation, visual effects are a very modern way of telling stories, of conveying emotion, of seeking truth. And I encourage our graduates, our students in the program, our faculty to always consider how Indigenous ways of knowing can be honored and incorporated into how we tell stories in animation, in visual effects, and in all forms of digital media. I'll have some further remarks at the end of the show, but for now, please allow me to introduce the chair of the program, a wonderful instructor, and someone who's been at the heart of this program since its inception at RDP, Peter Fiala.
Hi, everybody. It's great that you're here. So I wanted to just give you some quick context about what you'll be watching tonight. You'll be seeing a variety of work that each student has individually tailored for one or two areas in the animation and visual effects pipeline. So although the work that will only be per student on the screen for a few minutes each, this is standard in the world of animation and VFX. And also, even though the work is only on for a few minutes each time. What it represents is months and months of work and revisions and improvement, and they make it look good, but it's not easy. So what we're gonna do tonight is about 60 minutes of presentations for the first group, then a 20-minute intermission, followed by another about 55 minutes of presentations, and then closing remarks. Might be necessary to let you know that there's one or two clips that may have some mild language. And also, I'd like to say thank you to the Art Center staff for helping us make this production. This is fantastic. And something else that's very exciting is that this is being streamed live. And if it's anything like last year, not only were there people in Red Deer or surrounding provinces, there were other countries and even people from other continents watching. So let's hope we have that again tonight. Okay, so I'm actually really excited. I hope you are as well. And so let's just get going. So if our first student, if you could come up here now, please. Thanks.
Hello, everybody. Welcome. I would like to start off my part of the presentation by showing you my final work. When I joined this program 4 years ago, I had one question in my mind. What would it take to put myself into the world of my favorite franchises? Dedication, focus, creativity, an iron stomach, and a general disregard for humiliation. A lot of my projects involved varying degrees of embarrassing things I had to film out in public. It didn't get better. But in the end, I had to accept the risks and roll with the punches, no matter who saw me or what happened. I had to do what I had to do. And in the end, I think it was really worth it. Oh boy. Hello, everybody. My name is Gabriel Sonnenberg, and I'm a generalist who specialized in compositing. What is compositing? Well, it's the very end of the pipeline where you take all of the other departments' work and put it into the final production piece. The problem with studying that at school is that you also have to be a part of making everything in the first place to then put together in the end. So the way it started out was I went online and I found these models. All these models have controllers and colors and a bunch of different tools that allow me to basically recreate them in footage. And it's up to me to decide whether or not I want them to be cartoony or realistic. So here's just a little bit of how they work. Then you move on to building the scene. For the Spider-Man video that you saw initially, I wanted to put myself into a VFX world. So I scoured the internet looking for buildings and roads, basically anything I needed to build a fake city that you see here. And then once it was complete, I went on to animation tests and camera layouts. Blocking and shot planning is a very vital step in the filmmaking process because it basically gives you an idea of what the final shot's going to look like. So I spent many hours at this phase. Look at him go. It was very tedious, and there were a lot of software crashes, but you endure. Then it was moving on to green screen and rotoscope work. It was very tedious because I did not have direct access to a green screen, so cutting myself out of my realistic footage took some time. But once I had my cutouts, it was as simple as putting in my fake city right in behind myself, completing the illusion. After some sound effects and some camera effect work like motion blur and stuff, you get the final product. Majestic. Okay, moving on to the DeLorean video. This scene was a mindset swap from Spider-Man. This time the goal was to make the car seem as real as possible in my world. So my first approach was to recreate my alleyway in the software you see here called Maya, and have the car interact with some ground planes that would catch some shadows from my objects. After that, I threw in an artificial sun and an appropriation model of the pine tree that's outside my house to get some authentic shadows on top of the car as well as the ground plane itself. After that, it was then on to animation. Study how cars move. Make sure that this DeLorean feels like it exists in real life. Once my rendered animation was done, it was then into this software here called Nuke, which is generally used mainly for compositing, and that's exactly what I used it for. Right here, I'm doing some rotoscope work, which involves recreating shapes from the environment of the video, such as the fence and the garbage cans, and basically covering up the footage of the DeLorean, just like that, to make it seem as though it's passing in between everything, because these are two separate video files. Once I was satisfied with that, I would then bring all this footage into Adobe, where I would then add color grading and sound effects, nail down the timing, add some camera shake, and you get this. The next two projects had a very similar workflow to the DeLorean video. I found adding elements into real life footage to be way more fulfilling and satisfying. So the workflows are pretty much the same. Film, place the objects, light the scene, then add some sound and camera effects. Send it off. It's done. I make it sound so simple. And then the Pokemon project. This one only came to be because I happened to find a Pokeball model online and was curious, how long could I get a final shot put together? This was right before my deadlines. I think it took a week, and the hardest part was getting rid of the dog. That is Link the dog. He is great, and he was the best actor. I have had a wonderful time here at RDP for the last 4 years, and I'm happy to take my newfound skills out into the world. Time to manifest my future career. Thank you, everybody. I've been Gabriel, still am actually, and I appreciate all you coming out this evening. There's so many great people and other projects that you're going to get to see and hear from tonight, so enjoy.
Do you remember what it felt like to be a little kid, completely absorbed by a story? Maybe it was a book or your favorite movie. The kind where you forget you're sitting on the couch eating popcorn because just for a moment you become a part of another world. Those moments where the world around you disappears for a little while and you become fully immersed in the characters and their journey. My name is Lydia, and that feeling, the ability to step into another world and become someone else, is what made me want to become an animator. Before joining the animation program at RDP, I had spent nearly 6 years working with kids at summer camp and daycare. At a certain point, I realized I wanted to go back to school and pursue something different, something creative, but choosing to leave behind what I was comfortable with meant stepping into completely new and unfamiliar territory. I've always loved storytelling, but what I didn't fully understand yet was just how much time, observation, and problem solving that animation requires. Over time, I've realized that animators aren't just artists taking pen to paper, or hands to mouse and keyboard. In many ways, we are performers too. We have to think about how a character feels, how they move, and how they react to the world around them. I've learned a lot over the past 4 years, but this year pushed me to grow in ways I didn't expect. When I look at my work from earlier on compared to now, I can see just how much I've grown. And a big part of that growth has come from learning to trust the process. Animation is a process of experimentation, and things don't always go the way you plan. Shots need to be reworked, ideas change, and sometimes the best thing you can do is step back from a different angle and approach the problem there. There are definitely moments this year where projects felt frustrating and overwhelming. I consider myself to be a pretty patient person, but I'm now convinced that listening to the same audio hundreds of times over is a form of psychological torture. Moments like these also became some of the most important lessons. One of the biggest lessons was that it's not just about making big moves or pulling off some complicated techniques, it's about understanding the deeper, quieter elements that make a character feel alive. Instead of just making a character move, you have to think about why they move the way they do. What are they feeling? What are they thinking? What is their story? One of the most important tools animators use to answer these questions is reference footage. This means filming myself acting out movements and performances so I can study the timing, body language, and expressions that make a character feel believable. The process can look ridiculous, but as animators, we don't just observe characters, we become them. In a way, there's a small piece of me in every character I animate and in every story I bring to life. Now, without further ado, I would like to share with you my animation demo reel before my closing statements.
Have some fire. Be unstoppable. Be a force of nature. Be better than anyone here. And don't give a damn what anyone thinks. There are no teams here. No buddies. You're on your own. Be on your own.
Guys, we are friends. Oh, I love you guys. Ah!
You look like a dumbass, okay? Because look at this. You see this? You see that? There's no hair under here, bro. Okay?
What's the significance of that?
It makes me aerodynamic when I fight.
My understanding of animation has deepened in so many ways. Animation isn't just about technical skill, it's about communication. Every pose, every movement, every expression is a way of telling the audience something about a character. A small shift can have big impact. Even the smallest details can completely change how a moment feels. Animation is a craft that takes years to develop. You are never the perfect animator. My education extends far beyond this degree, but these last 4 years have given me the tools to continue my growth. At the end of the day, animation is about bringing something to life that didn't exist before. A character, a moment, a story. And that, to me, is the magic that I want to keep sharing with the world. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Mahika and I'm specializing in 3D modeling and texturing. As someone from a traditional art background, I was quite intimidated by this course. But as I got used to the different softwares, I found that it's not that different. I was able to apply my observation skills from the years of life drawing to follow concepts closely and painting skills to create desired textures. Today, I want to walk you through some of the projects I've worked on over the past year and share a bit of what I've learned along the way. But first, I'd like to share my demo reel. Fourth year, I knew my goal was to get better at character design and retopology, so that's exactly what I did. I immediately started fixing up my mantis sculpt from the special projects class in third year. My first step was to straighten out the character's limbs as much as I could in ZBrush, as I initially sculpted him post. Then I put him in Maya for retopology, which, if you don't know, is basically drawing squares on top of the high poly sculpt to make it lower poly, making it easier to work later in the pipeline. Once I was done retopologizing, I realized that he didn't quite look like a character, but more like just a regular mantis. So I studied a lot of creature designs and from other artists, and also got some great feedback from our mentor, Chance. I started by exaggerating the thorax and arms and abdomen, making them more bulky. I also exaggerated the torsus and made the mandibles much bigger. I tilted the head down for a more menacing look. Once I made those edits, I was happy with my model and moved on to texturing. I textured him in Substance Painter. I used red and green as my primary color, using red to make him look more like a predator. Through this project, I was able to learn a lot about character art and creating clean topology so that my model is functional for rigging. For this project, I wanted to work on translating a 2D character concept to 3D and seeing how it works. I really liked a shot of Gwen, a character from an animated show called Knights of Guinevere, where her face was half metal and half prosthetic skin, and immediately decided that I wanted to model her. I made a quick concept design with small changes to fit my vision to make it workable for 3D modeling. I made a rough sculpt of the face and body in ZBrush and started retopologizing in Maya. While While working, I really struggled with the design of the mechanical bits in the torso. In the show, they're able to hide it all with blue guts and really simplify it, which unfortunately I wasn't able to do in 3D as it didn't match my concept. So instead, I spent a lot of time looking at animatronic references and to design the mechanics that look realistic enough. After a lot of careful considerations and minor tweaks, I was able to get to a stage where I was happy with the overall model. While texturing, I focused a lot on keeping the details more minimal to let her have a more stylized look, like in the 2D show. I looked at a lot of close-up references of Gwen and other 3D animated shows and games to understand how they approach the shading. As I was reaching the end of the texturing stage, I realized that I was not happy with the initial color scheme that I picked for her, as there was nothing that complemented her grayish-purple skin and blue in her hair, guts, and dress was overpowering her overall design. So I made multiple different color keys with minor tweaks and shade ranges to land on a color palette that I was happy with. By pushing the values of the shadow on her dress to warmer tones and adding purple to her waist belt, I was able to separate her guts from the skirt, and by adding purple to her guts, I was able to further separate them from the blue hair. With these changes, I was able to create a character with a more unified color palette. I'm glad I worked on this project as it taught me a lot about character design and different shading techniques. My next project was a harmonium, an Indian classical instrument. I always wanted to model a musical instrument while sticking to a set scale, which luckily the reference I found was a website selling the harmonium, so I got the exact dimensions that I could follow. Once I was done modeling, I put the harmonium in Substance Painter and got to texturing. One thing I paid a lot of attention to was how the wood texture looked in certain parts to match my vision, which led to me hand-drawing the wooden texture on top of the harmonium. Through this project, I was able to learn a lot about prop design and how to intentionally create wear on my prop in order to tell a story. Over last summer, I worked as an applied research intern at SimTag, where I worked in a team of 5 students to develop a VR strategy wheelchair curling game. The goal of the project was to create a training tool that could help athletes practice strategy and get used to the stadium as they prepare for the 2026 Paralympic Games. We worked closely with Curling Canada and got some great feedback from them. My role was to simulate Milano Cortina Stadium as closely as possible while still working under a budget of 100,000 vertices. I quickly started looking at references and breaking down the arena into smaller modular models that I can instance by making prefabs in Unity to have less draw calls. While texturing, my goal was to keep the scene as optimized as possible. So I made trim sheets and texture atlases for the environments and flags. While lighting, I used mixed lighting in order to keep the scene optimized. I baked the lights into the environment, which is almost like assigning texture maps to models, only it acts like lights. And then real-time directional light for the main ice sheet, because that was one of our hero assets. Through this project, I learned a lot about environment art and optimizing for games. I'm really thankful for the chance to work on this game and experience working with the team. I would also like to thank my instructors and peers for being with me throughout this journey. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Today is a very special day, and thank you for being here with me, either in person or online. My name is Kyla Clegg, and I'd like to share with you my journey that brought me here on stage today. As a kid, I always loved to draw, and that's what guided me down the path of animation. During my first year, we were encouraged to be creative and colorful. At first, it was also overwhelming, but at the same time exhilarating. As we explored the fundamentals of composition and color theory, I always challenged myself. I loved pushing boundaries and a bit of my professor's patience. Throughout the years, classes got more advanced, and I was creating much larger scenes. I was drawn to 3D modeling and interior architecture, how simple shapes like a cube or cylinder could be refined to create lifelike furniture that, when put together, could build a home. At first, I started small, but then I challenged myself to go bigger and soon was making full-size houses. I was trying to explore the idea of different lifestyles and personalities of families and how that can reflect into their home. During this time, I was teaching myself simulation work and creating soft edges and fabrics. I also found my second love in lighting these rooms and bringing warmth into them. For my 4th year, if I'm being entirely honest, I didn't know where to focus or even begin. But back to the beginning is where I went. As I was browsing libraries of 3D assets, I found a few models and started putting them together. I then traveled to Photoshop to recreate brick textures and stained glass windows. At first time I lit this scene, it did not look as great as I imagined. So I tried again after a little bit and got the results I wanted and the courage to be bold and brighter. Next, I completely flew off the rails and decided to recreate the scene from Phantom of the Opera. I was feeling very brave and very confident that I might have been a bit blinded by ambition. I had a lot of fun with this project, and it really pushed me to realism rather than my traditional animated look. I used a lot of previous simulations and the power of copy and paste to fill the room, but the lighting is what really brought this piece to life. While you have your main spotlight, there is so much more going on in the background, behind the camera, and it really opened my eyes to the effort and it takes to cinematic pieces. Every time I moved the camera or changed a setting, I'd be waiting about 4 to 6 minutes for the final image to load. But in the end, this was by far my most largest and proudest project. Moving on, I really started to question what I was going to do after graduation. I had just started my last semester and I was feeling more pressure than ever about my career. I was asking myself where animation played a role in our day-to-day lives. I wanted to change it up a bit and focus on a smaller project, like recreating this brooch from a show I watched. This inspired me towards advertising and product marketing. I found in the logo that I made back in high school. I know, such a long time ago. And I wanted to make it pop more. I explored the Toon shader and how it made 3D objects look hand-drawn. As a little treat, I put together a simple scene for the logo, something I can do today that I could only have dreamed of before. I really enjoyed working with a 2D and 3D look. I wanted to create a simple advertisement, something that you would see while casually scrolling through social media. Just a short clip promoting a product. I was working between drawing textures and modeling the can, but my main focus was finishing before a 24-hour deadline, like a real-world experience. For my final project, I wrapped up with everything that I loved. I built the interior and attempted to use AI to switch things up and create wallpapers and textures. I then played around with some interesting lighting, all while listening to horror podcasts to get into the right mood. For this ad, I did not want to go into depth about the product, but more about the room and atmosphere that it was in. Green is a very unique color and is not often used, especially so saturated, and I had an absolute blast with all the spotlights. In the end, I had lots of fun during my 4th year. I had so many big plans and goals, but just because I wasn't able to complete everything doesn't mean that I was a failure. I'm quite happy with the many paths that it took and all the new things that I learned along the way. Thank you for being here today and supporting my journey in obtaining my AVFX degree. I'd like to end things by sharing with you my demo reel and all of my most proudest achievements here at Red Deer Polytechnic. everyone.
Hello there, my name is Annika Smook, and before the year started, I sat back and thought, what am I doing? I had no clue what I wanted to dedicate my final year to, so I started by asking myself, what do I enjoy, what do I find unchallenging, and then what do I shy away from? I wanted this year to focus not on the end product, but on my process and relearning to find enjoyment in my craft. My big project this year was a short film utilizing all parts of the pipeline I've learned. I pitched, modeled, retopologized, rigged, textured, and animated everything. And here's the final product. This is a short film about a witch's familiar getting up to trouble while its owner is away. While there are small aspects in all areas of the pipeline I could find enjoyment in, modeling is where my heart is set and where I feel the most fulfillment. For the next couple of slides, I'd like to focus on what that process is like. Going into this, I knew I wanted a simple but appealing design that wouldn't be out of place in some sort of children's programming. It was tricky trying to find reference for a character that doesn't exist, and that definitely slowed me down when trying to figure out proportions. So I did a little sketch and a rough mock-up clay sculpt to figure out the style before heading into the sculpting program. In ZBrush, things started out all right. I always start with a blocking out phase to get the proportions I want. It's when I started adding feathers is when I needed to start being picky about positioning, as I need to keep the future rig in mind. When retopologizing, I found it easiest to work in islands, focusing on feathers and tricky areas first, and then worrying about how to connect them all together later. I knew from the start I didn't want to spend too much time on rigging. My rig didn't need to be extremely fancy with all the bells and whistles, it just had to do the motions required while looking cute. The video playing now is a showcase of my rig as I get it into a pose. Aiden, another student you'll see more of later on, was a huge help with cleaning up the paint weights around the shoulder/chest area. It was great collaborating with another student whose focus is on rigging, as it allowed me to see the different ways we approach a problem. Now, I would like to move into talking about some of the other projects I've really enjoyed in my course, starting with my sci-fi spider. Like usual, gathered reference and media I enjoyed, interesting shapes, textures, and created a rough mock-up with basic shapes that I then traced over to create my reference sheet on the right. Like with any of my projects, I like to make a rough model with all the pieces laid out before I start truly modeling. This helps with figuring out the scale of all the pieces. After some texturing and substance painter, here are the final renders. Then early this November, I came across this vintage Christmas card, and it made me think about the cats my family has owned growing up. This quickly inspired me to make my own version that I could then print into ornaments for a tree. I also figured that this project would help me step out of my comfort zone and generally just help with gaining confidence in ZBrush since it had been a while. After gathering stylistic reference, I started sculpting a rough base that I could then shape into each individual cat. Then it was finally time to get them all together and start posing them in the scene. I absolutely love how they turned out, and in the future, I would like to push this project even further by modeling/texturing fur closer to the vintage reference. I've had a blast these last 4 years figuring out who I am and what I enjoy doing, Now, the final thing I'd like to share is a demo reel of all my favorite projects I've done. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Paige and welcome to my portfolio project. My chosen specialty is environment art for games. I love problem-solving my way through the entire pipeline to create a game-ready scene. I'm constantly trying to recreate atmospheres and experiences in 3D, and that's what drew me to this specialty. Last semester, I created this prop group. I created a hero piece that included many different types of models to practice the skills I've been training over the past few years. When I was developing a concept, I was drawn to the idea of something abandoned and overgrown, which complemented what I was planning to practice and accomplish. As I worked on this piece, it became clear to me which parts of the process I enjoyed and which I hated. I had never created foliage before, so I researched many different techniques. The process is almost always an image on a plane with added geometry to make its shape. Since a plane isn't a three-dimensional object, you can get away with a lot. So when it comes to game optimization, foliage is a fun way to fill a scene without overloading it. I started with a base pile low poly mesh. Then I began modeling my monitors and boxes and placing them onto it. I hand-painted the foliage in Photoshop and modeled my cards in Maya, with added geometry to give them shape. I quickly realized that the more of the plant I drew in Photoshop, the less work I had to do in 3D. Placing leaves by hand is a lot more work than drawing multiple branch variations with the leaves attached. After creating my vines this way, I moved on to simpler techniques. I textured my monitor in Substance Painter, but realized I preferred Photoshop and making my own texture maps for the cardboard boxes. Especially when using filters, I found Photoshop more intuitive to match the comic book effect. In Unreal Engine, I researched and replicated a comic book shader that I applied to my entire scene to give the entire prop group an illustrative look. Becoming familiar with Unreal Engine and its material creation has been very helpful in how I approach upcoming projects. This semester, I created a Japanese environment inspired by my trip to Japan this year. I don't like to spend too much time in the blockout phase, as I know I will likely replace everything in my scene. I stuck with basic shapes and used the landscape tool to develop the mountainside. During my trip, I encountered many stone structures covered in moss, and I was enchanted by them. I've been having fun this semester playing with different ways to add moss to my models and finding out which look the best. I created a concrete material in Substance Designer to help me learn a little bit more of that software. In Unreal Engine, I added procedural moss to the stone monuments. Learning more about building materials directly in a game engine was very valuable as I approached different tasks down the line. I decided to alter my concept to a torii gate instead of the initial structure I had in my concept. I wanted to focus the time I had left on foliage creation, and the scope of my initial model was too big for what I was trying to achieve this term. I'm very happy with how it turned out, and I love how it fits into my scene. I created several custom trees in a program called Tree It. The program has many bark, leaf, and branch scans that are free to use. Since I was creating a realistic scene, using these scans let me focus on the procedural creation of the trees. I wanted to create my own textures for the trees and foliage, but the realistic nature of this project would have demanded a few more months of work. The learning curve between realistic and stylized assets has been the biggest adjustment for me this year. For the rest of the forest floor, I used photographs of different plants and cut them out into cards in Maya, placed them into their required shapes, and set up their corresponding texture maps. As I was putting everything together, there was a few things left for me to tackle. I had more work to do in the material editor to make sure my landscape texture wasn't repeating infinitely. I used the foliage tool for the first time to place grass effectively and efficiently around my scene. I also added wind animations to my foliage to bring it to life. Throughout this year, I've been able to narrow down what it is I want to create and how I go about doing it. After finishing these projects, I've learned a lot about my craft, my style, and myself. I'm proud of what I was able to achieve this year, and I can't wait to continue growing as an artist. Now, after this, we will have a look at my demo reel. Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Ben Kelly. So, brief introduction, I'm a fourth year AVFX student, and my goal for this past year was to show off just how much I've learned in the past 4 years during my time at Red Deer Polytechnic. At the beginning of the year, I set out a plan to finish a small project every 2 weeks, and with a few snags along the way, every 2 weeks I would have a short animation, which I would then light, render, and do the post-production to transform into pixel art, similar to the methods used in games like Donkey Kong Country and Signalis. Additionally, I was working on 2 larger scale character animations. My workflow was, for the first week, I would be fully committed to animation, and for the second, I would try to keep each task to 1 per day. This ensured that if need be, I could extend my animation into the second week while staying on target. So you can see there a bit of my animation process. Then I would light and render the scene using Arnold. Then I would bring it into NukeX, where I would grade the animation and add a background that I could use, and then bring it into Adobe After Effects, where I would then transform it into pixel art. For my second semester, I set my sights a little higher. Instead of multiple projects, I would aim my sights at just 1 larger scale, multi-shot animation, alongside creating 2 rigs, 1 creature rig and 1 facial rig. My goal for the animation was to recreate the low-budget cell animation of the early 80s with lots of held frames. And for my rigs, the goal was to complete them early, giving me more time to work on my animation. This had mixed results, but for the most part, I'm proud of my time and effort. Here you can see some of my storyboards for my animation. And then here you can see some of my blocking phase. And without further ado, let's see what I've done.
Watch a movie anymore without a big pour of wine and popcorn.
How'd you find my house? Because I used the computer at Best Buy to find you. All right.
Thank you.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Paige, and for my final year, I chose to specialize in rigging and technical art. These roles are very behind the scenes in productions, but rigging is basically the step between modeling and animation. It's my job to add skeletons and controllers to 3D models so that animators can move them easily and in whatever way they need to. Technical art is a broader term, but it's mostly concerned with the creation of tools to speed up productions and help artists. And don't worry, I promise this isn't nearly as boring and technical as I make it sound. So with that little explanation out of the way, I'd first like to show you my demo reel and then go into the details of my projects. One of the first things that made me want to get into 3D was when I was younger, I used to love playing these 3D escape room games with their intricate puzzles and pieces you can put together and watch move around. I wanted to do something that let me recreate that sense of wonder and curiosity I felt, so I thought I wanted to be a 3D modeler. But while I was working, I felt like there was something missing, a sense of challenge. I wanted to be constantly problem solving, fixing, and discovering new things on a more technical level. And it turns out that's exactly what rigging artists do. One of the first models that I wanted to rig was this lizard monster because it had some unique features I thought would provide a good challenge beyond the simple bipeds I had done before. When rigging, there's a lot of problems I have to solve simultaneously. I have to figure out if this creature were even real, how would it move? What exists in real life that I can use and draw on as reference? What features do I want to see added to this rig? How do I even add it? And most importantly, how do I make the animator's job easier? Well, I was so eager to answer those questions that I spent the whole summer between semesters working on this rig. And even though it was only a few short months, my independent studying let me learn a lot of new techniques, such as fingers that can stick to surfaces, and even a hair simulation in the tail, so it can move on its own with way less effort from the animator. But when my lizard and I came back from our summer break, it turned out there were a lot of foundational things wrong with this rig. Eyelids were flipping backward, and limbs would twist in very painful-looking ways, and at the time it was a bit discouraging. But it was an excellent reminder of how it's the first few basic steps that are the most important, no matter what you might learn. You cannot force pieces to go together, and if they don't work, nothing that you add or connect to them will work, and soon your whole rig doesn't work. And that's a lesson after this lizard I take into all of my projects now. My second project was a facial rig, and for me, the facial rig was sort of my benchmark test because it tested all of my skills, from things such as joint placement, controller layout, rig flexibility, blend shape sculpting, and even advanced setups using nodes. To date, I have built 3 different facial rigs, and the first that you're about to see now is terrible, awful. I had no idea what I was doing. The controller layout is ugly and unintuitive, and the face shapes it makes are unnatural and kind of disturbing, even for a cartoony chameleon. Between the body and the face, it took me 4 months to get this rig into a finished state. My second attempt, though, was much better. very unstable and experimental, but I understood more of what I was actually doing. It took me half the time with 2 months. And the third, which you saw in my demo reel, is by far the cleanest. I built it with intention from start to end, and I know exactly what each piece in it does. And it only took me 9 days. Despite the trial and error, facial rigs are some of my favorite to complete because they are so incredibly rewarding. I remember putting this one through animation tests, and all of a sudden this static statue of a face had life. It could smile, it could scowl. All the small pieces I had put in were working together, and it was really cool to see. My third project is finally where the technical art comes in. To show I could do variety in my demo reel, I wanted the limbs of these cute little creatures to squash and stretch like you'd see in the old cartoons. But as you might be able to tell by now, rigging can be a very tedious and precise process, and doing it manually always opens up the chance for my human error. So to solve this, I learned Python, a beginner-friendly programming language, and created this simple auto limb script. It handles all of the organization, joints, controllers, plus I can add squash, stretch, and twist whenever I need to. I also managed to complete a second tool known as a curve library, and this handles all the normally very frustrating parts of controller creation. You can select from pre-made shapes, control the colors, sizing, naming, and most importantly, it allows you to mirror and combine curves, which when done by hand is very time-consuming. I'm incredibly grateful for the skills I was able to develop over these 4 years, and I can't believe they're coming to an end already. I look forward to continuing to learn new workflows and creating collaborative projects even after graduation. And even though it turned out I'm not the one directly creating those fantastic puzzles I love, I do get to help make them and do all the problem solving I want at the same time. Thank you so much.
Well, hi everybody. So now it's time for our 20-minute intermission. So I guess the lights will come up and we'll, perfect, and photo. Thank you. Okay, so see you all back here in 20 minutes for the next group of students' presentations. everybody. So we're going to be starting right away with our next student presenter. Thank you.
Awesome. Hello, my name is Carson Brott, and going into my final semester of the program, I found myself asking a question very important to my future. What does it take to get a job in animation? Should I be honing one skill and becoming an absolute master of my craft, a professional at one thing? Or should I be branching out and working on a variety of animation skills? Aha! That's it. I should be branching out. I should be working on becoming a jack of all trades. As the old saying goes, a jack of all trades is a master of none, but oftentimes better than a master of one. Animation studios don't look for junior artists to be masters of their crafts. They want someone who is pliable and flexible, can do any animation that comes across their desk on a day-to-day basis, with a certain degree of competence, of course. These can include simple animations, such as the ones we worked on in first year, our cannonball animation, for example, or getting into run cycles, such as my bipedal run cycle, a guy running on 2 legs. Getting a little more complex than that, though, we move up towards quadruped run cycles, so featuring my horse rig here. But this is still pretty simple. I need to do dynamic movements, jumping over and ducking under obstacles as they come at them. But animation isn't all about running and jumping. Animation and film as a whole is also about the art of theater. I need to be able to take a character and make them appear contemplative or concerned. And at a moment's notice, when they see a friend enter the room, now they're happy, excited. I need to take audio tracks and make my characters speak. Bring in the audio in and work on some lip syncing. Oh, missed it. Okay. So, now getting into my process on working on animations, there's a lot of work that goes in before you go anywhere near 3D software. You have to gather and create reference. If you're gathering reference, that will come up in a moment, that doesn't look so great, like Batman rolling down a black surface, I have to roll down a hill so I can see what's going on while he rolls down that hill. We line up reference inside of our animation software so we can block out key frames of our animations. Big important poses that I want to see in that animation, nice and exaggerated. I may have to reshoot reference if I just want a different camera angle. I'm not interested in that camera switching, so I have to keep that stable angle. Of course, I would never stand in for an elephant. I have lots and lots of reference out there on the internet. Everybody's got a camera these days, and there's a lot of footage to work with. So there's stuff like that. But some animals aren't just as easy to find as elephants. If I want to animate a velociraptor, unfortunately for me, they're all extinct. So I need to go ahead and look for the next best thing. The best comparison I have for a velociraptor will come up in a moment here, being the ostrich. So an animal that has maybe similar weight, but definitely similar bone structure and musculature to the velociraptor. When it runs around, I can get an idea of a center of gravity and where those feet are going to land. But there's more than one way to approach animating something like a velociraptor. I'm a big fan of the Jurassic Park books, where the dinosaurs are described as having very bird-like motions. So using this reference of the cassowary, I've made a bird walk animation as well as part of my final year projects. And that goes through all of my blocking and reference here. We're going to go straight into my demo reel here with my 5 strongest animations from the last 4 years. Here it goes. In a moment. I'd like to end just by thanking all the amazing instructors and classmates that have supported me throughout my 4 years in this program. It's been one of the, I'm getting emotional. Ooh, it's been one of the best things that's happened to me in my life. Same goes for my family out there. Such great support you guys have all given me. And I look forward to continue working on becoming a jack of all trades. Thank you.
I'm just going to start this by showing you my demo reel. So, hello, my name is Aiden, and as you could probably guess by my demo reel, I've been focused in on rigging for my final year of college. Now, luckily for me, Julia went before me, so I don't have to explain what rigging is to all of you. So, instead, I'm going to take this time to talk to you all a little bit about failure. See, I was the kind of kid in school who got good grades without even really trying, and as a result, I expected myself to be perfect at all times. I saw any instance of a mistake, any error as a failure on my part. But that's a problem because as it turns out, in order to avoid mistakes, you don't take risks. You stick with what you already know. You don't learn anything new. And so part of my experience in college has been learning that mistakes are, in fact, okay to make, and not only that, they are a vital part of the learning experience. So, to take you through some of the mistakes that I have made this year and the eventual successes that they would allow me to achieve, I'm going to start with the beginning of my first semester. I decided that I was going to put together a whole character concept and design. I was going to take that and put it in ZBrush, sculpt it, and then take that sculpt, bring it into Maya, and retopologize it. Note that none of those things I just listed are rigging. After I was done with the retopology, I did actually start the rigging end of things. I took a bit of time to learn the basics of the coding language Python, and I used that to put together a script to help automate part of the process of making FK-IK switching limbs. And I used that to help rig the limbs of the beaver model that I made before. Additionally, I also used Maya's built-in N-hair simulation to give the rope on the beaver's belt some dynamics-based, physics-based movement. That went all right, but as you can see, there's a bit of a clipping problem there. And towards the end of my first semester, I did some facial rigging on the beaver. It was a mixture of joint-based and blend shape-based. Blend shape-based I had done before. That's basically you sculpt parts of the facial expressions. And joint-based I had not done before in facial rigging, but that's how you usually rig the rest of the character. Now, at that point, I was very dissatisfied with the beaver. Everything that I had done in my first semester, even though I broke them into different individual projects, were all having to do with that beaver rig in some way, shape, or form. And all I saw when I looked at the total beaver rig was all those little mistakes adding up into one big disappointment. I did not like this thing. I was very unhappy with it, and it had taken far too long for what it was, in my opinion. And so I realized that going forward, I needed to scale my projects down into something a lot more manageable. So I moved on to redoing a pair of rigs that I had done in my third year for our special projects class. The point with these was that they were simple, cartoony, and they had squashing and stretching in the head. I realized with my first that it was kind of a wasted opportunity to not also have that stretching in the limbs and spine, and so when I redid them this year, that's exactly what I added. They went by pretty smoothly, give or take a few snags that were pretty easily and quickly fixed. Where the failure comes in is looking back at the old versions. I was proud of them at the time, but I look at them now and I am once again seeing what I would consider a failure by my standards now. Not only could they not scale properly, but the squashing and stretching in the head, the entire purpose for which they were made, is not very good. But looking back at that gave me some perspective. Not only had I improved quite a bit in less than a year's time, but it made me realize that your first time doing something is never going to be perfect. But that flawed first attempt is more than worth doing because it lays down the foundation that you can later build upon. I would not have been able to do those very nice, very good versions of the rig I'm proud of without having first done those not so good versions of the rigs. With those complete, I moved on to rigging my classmate Mahika's praying mantis model. Now this was a bit of a departure from what I've done before. I've never done a bug before, and you have to paint weight those in such a way that it deforms like a rigid exoskeleton rather than soft skin. This one was another instance of flawed first attempts. I had never done a pinnable IK like you just saw there with the foot before, and the feet of a bug are generally structured pretty differently from anything I had worked on before. I had used what's called a ribbon setup on the antennas, and I don't think I set it up properly, if I'm going to be completely honest. As you can see with that test animation there, I was not focused in on animation. The point of that was for me to get a feel for how it would be for an animator to use the controls on this thing. And I made a few edits to the controllers based on that. Could probably still use a bit of polishing, but at some point along the line working on it, it was once again taking too long. And if there's anything I learned from the Beaver is that when you spend too long on something, eventually you start getting frustrated, you get slowed down, it just starts suffering overall. And so after I got it into a point where it was looking pretty good despite its flaws, I decided that I needed to move on to something else to end off my year. And I decided that that should be a joint-based facial rig. I had mentioned before that I was not happy with how the Beaver facial setup was, and where I'd made the most mistakes was in terms of the joint setup on the joint-based end of things. So I decided to make an entirely joint-based facial setup. I wanted also to improve the controller layout, and I feel that I succeeded in both of those things. I'm quite happy with the deformations I got. I actually did the joint-based setup correctly this time, and it went extremely smoothly. I finished it ahead of schedule, and I was just generally very satisfied. It was a very nice send-off to the end of my year. But in comparing it to the Beaver rig, it made me realize a few things about my friend the Beaver. Despite the fact that I was very unhappy with that thing, the mistakes I had made on it had colored my actions and decision-making throughout the entire rest of my year because I had made the most mistakes on it. Working on it made me realize that I was more of a sprinter than a marathoner when it came to projects. I worked better and I learned better from smaller scale, shorter, more focused projects rather than large scale, multi-part projects where I'm learning a whole slew of new things. It made me realize areas where I needed to improve, and generally it was the biggest learning experience I had in this year despite my rocky relationship with it. Overall, I've been pretty happy with how this year's went, and with my newfound comfort with making mistakes, I am looking forward to making a whole bunch more. Thank you.
Hello. What does it take to make a scene? I am Brady Ferguson, and I spent this year trying to figure that out. And let me tell you, a lot more goes into it than you would expect. I started out by wanting to make a big central prop to kind of guide my thing, so I decided to use this wizard staff. It blends organic shapes in the branch with inorganic metal in the body of the staff and the processed wood. A nice contrast between the two to kind of give a good feeling for different textures and ideas for what I could work with. I started out by laying out a bunch of rough concepts, just get ideas out there before picking one I like and refined it to something more usable. After that, in Maya, I laid out very basic shapes, a guideline of how I wanted this thing to flow and work, before taking it into ZBrush, sculpting it, refining it, adding more details, and creating the branch and the gem. After taking it into Maya for cleanup and retopology, I textured it, and that is the result. But it wasn't perfect. The branch did not read very well, and after getting feedback, I had a new plan. Took the branch back into ZBrush and created a much better one that reads more like a branch, more organic, and just overall more natural feeling than what I had before. Here's a comparison between the two, and this is just what goes into one prop. Then I moved on to creating a whole study. I gathered a bunch of reference to inform the vibe and feeling that I was going for. Then we go into blocking again, laying out a basic room, a window, some structures for the roof, and then basic shapes, fill out the room, give an idea of what we're working with before refining them into their final shape, and then adding large props, big things to work with, and then more stuff to fill out the space, give an idea of things before adding more stuff. And then when you think you have enough stuff, you add even more. But it's hard work, it's a lot of effort, but sticking with it, I found I created something magical. For this room, I wanted to create kind of a vintage vibe, a feeling that whoever had been living here had been using this stuff consistently and frequently for a very long time. Lots of wear and tear and bits that have seen a lot of use. But in things like the clock and the large book and the staff is a little newer. Maybe somebody else has taken up residence here, has inherited this space and is now making use of it. A lot of effort put into the storytelling of the props, the large chair there. I wanted to make it so that everything felt used, like it had a purpose and somebody has actually been living in this space. Details like fingerprints on the clock or just general scratching on this lantern. Wear and tear on the bag. This was the kind of story I was trying to build into the scene. The focus with these smaller pops was to try and keep them simple construction with less polygons to ensure that the scene functioned well. I learned a lot working on this project. There was many ups and downs, and it turned out to be a lot more work than I had intended, but I learned a lot, I had a lot of fun, and I want to continue to improve my skills and maybe make something even better in the future. Now I'll leave you with my demo reel. Thank you.
Hello. My name is Kayla Yowzi, and I'm a junior 3D modeling and texture artist, and I'm excited to share the work that I've created here at Red Deer Polytech with you today. Before we get started, you might be asking, what is 3D modeling? According to Wikipedia, it's the process of developing a mathematical coordinate-based representation of a surface of an object in 3 dimensions using special software that can manipulate edges, vertices, and polygons in a simulated 3D space. Or in practice, it's moving things around until it finally looks right, or you give up and call it abstract. To me, 3D modeling and creating in general is just another way to communicate and connect with people. Everyone has their thing. Some people love cars, baking, crafting, and some like chemistry so much they turn plastic gloves into grape soda just because they can. That last example is real, it's pretty cool. We found a medium where the limit is literally our own imagination. We take a shapeless idea, and with enough time and effort, we can make anything. Something inspirational, helpful, and even educational. Something that can give someone an entirely new perspective. Hands up if anyone here has ever cried during a Pixar movie. I know I have. It's like anything in life. You start small and build from there. You shape and refine until you have something finished. And yeah, things do go wrong. You have blue screens, crashes, you move something one way and it just completely implodes on itself. But those moments are where you really learn. And I know that's what I did. Throughout my time in this program, I was able to improve in my artistic skills in 2D and 3D, and it allowed me to push my boundaries and explore new areas I wouldn't have otherwise considered. I never realized how much lighting can make or break a scene, or how important it is to double-check your render settings before committing. And I also learned that I don't have to animate frame by frame to give my 2D pieces life. Techniques like matte painting and parallax effect opened up entirely new workflows for me. And while I enjoyed learning the whole process, I always found myself coming back to 3D animation and modeling. I had previous experience with 2D animation, and while they share the same core principles, animating in 3D made me think more of the anatomy that's going into each movement. It was no longer how each line moves, but how the whole body contorts to tell us a story. For example, did you know that when people express, that there's a small delay in what parts of the face moves first? I know I didn't. And for the first semester of my 4th year, I focused on an animation portfolio, but I just realized it wasn't the direction I wanted to pursue. This leads us into the area that I'm currently focusing on, 3D modeling and texturing. When I decided to switch my focus, I was pretty rusty, but getting to relearn the modeling tools in Maya and ZBrush have been a lot of fun. And every time I sat down to work, I picked up a new technique, sometimes intentionally, sometimes by complete accident. And over the past semester, I've been working on multiple small projects to ease myself back into the process. For my first project, I chose to model a health potion based on a design by my friend Aiden, or Stoat Silly over on Instagram. This project is still teaching me new ways to model things that are asymmetrical. It pushed me to think about more about how a 2D design translates into a 3D space. And if I had just recreated this one-for-one with the image, it would have looked fine, but only from one single angle. So I did have to adjust for it. And after focusing a lot of time on that project, I decided I needed to break and shift my focus. I challenged myself again with something new. I started to create a plushie based on a friend's character design, with the goal of using it as an interactable object in a VR environment. This was a great project because it combined simple and complex forms. The buttons and paws were easy to model in Maya, while more organic shapes pushed me to reintroduce ZBrush into my workflow. and I faced many issues modeling the front bangs. And I might have lost a couple days of trying to brute force it in Maya before our mentor Chance suggested to make it in ZBrush, which, I'll be honest, took about 10 minutes, so that was pretty humbling. But it really did reinforce the importance of choosing the right tool for the task. And for my third project, I wanted to challenge myself to work faster, so I ended up choosing to do a low poly 3D model. It taught me a lot about where to add extra polygons to keep the model clean and functional. And I'm happy to say I completed the design and modeling in about 2 hours. To wrap things up, this year has been really just about growth. I've been figuring things out, made so many mistakes, and just learning what works and what doesn't. Every single project I've done this year has pushed me in a different way, whether it was learning new tools or choosing a better workflow, or just realizing there was a much easier solution after struggling for so long. And while the process isn't always smooth, those challenges are what helped me improve and helped me find the direction I would love to keep pursuing in the future. So with that, I'd like to end by sharing my current demo reel, and I hope you enjoy. Thank you so much for your time.
Hi, I'm Ethan Morpizaka. I am First Nations and I'm from the Lillekwe, way from up north. I was always mechanically inclined since I was young. I was always fond of Legos and Bionicles. I was able to vision 3D fundamentals at a young age, and my mom and my brothers and my sisters have always pushed me to pursue my passion for art. I was a drawer ever since I was young. I always had passion, love, and many beautiful things and aspirations in my life. But growing up, it was always ripped away from me. Dreaming big was a threat. Always compared, never appreciated. My path is what I forged, and I am going to be the first member of my whole entire family to get a degree. Horror and scary elements always appealed to me. Scary games like Outlast, Resident Evil, and Evil Within. And today, I want to show you what kind of imaginations and nightmares that comes from afar. I want to show you what my visions that I see at night. Welcome to my demo reel. Thank you for your time.
Hello, I'm Zachary Zarwini, and I'm specializing in character animation. And how did I get here? As far back as being a kid, I've always loved playing video games and watching movies and taking interest in how they were made. And that led me to where I am today, where when I first started this program, I didn't know what I wanted to specialize in. But during my second year, I found a passion and enjoyment for animating. And as I continued this program, I managed to make friends and understand how to better improve myself, where I'll be in this industry once I graduate, and where to go next, you know? And here's my presentation.
Actually, take the spinach off, that's fine. And you can just do the lettuce and then the mayo off, and then I think that's good.
That last part?
Yep. Is that a gun?
Michelangelo, Leonardo, Da Vinci, they're all dead. I remain, you understand? I remain as a performance artist.
What's your favorite color, Nick?
Blue? No, green.
Awesome. I love learning about you.
I fucked up. It's yellow.
Can't rent a car with shower curtain rings, though. Well, somehow your Diners Club card wound up in my wallet, and I'd
like to thank my parents for dealing with me for the past 5 years, my professors for teaching me all that I know now, my friend and mentor, Ole Arns, who took time out of their day to give me advice on how I could improve my animations, and to all my friends online who have come to support me. Thank you.
Howdy, y'all. My name's Weston, and I am a 3D environment artist. Growing up playing games, watching movies, and reading books, I was always most drawn to settings and environments. From beautiful scenic landscapes to grand and imposing architecture, I've always had a strong appreciation for the environments in a story's setting. This is especially the case with video games, as they would allow me to explore such environments much more than any other medium. As such, modeling 3D environments for video games felt like a natural path for me to take. I took my first major step in this journey in my third year, where I designed and modeled a Gothic-style mausoleum crypt, like the ones you would find in a cemetery. This gave me the opportunity to practice modeling something old and weathered, plus Gothic architecture is something I've always had an appreciation for. Creating this model also served as an excellent point of reference when planning future projects. Moving into my fourth year, I came up with a plan to model a witch's hut, complete with a fully furnished interior. This project gave me the opportunity to practice modeling several important skills. There we go. It gave me experience on building trim sheets, which is extremely important when it comes to optimizing environmental assets for video games. I was also able to model several smaller assets like books, furniture, and a furnace, just to name a few, while also getting practice designing these assets in a style that complements their environment. Among these examples, and multiple others, I was also able to experience what it's like to work on a larger project, as this has been by far the biggest project I've worked on. I still have more plans for this project. I believe it would benefit from some retexturing and adding extra clutter to the interior, as adding extra clutter will make it feel much more lived in. But with that said, I decided to take a break from the Witch's Hut in order to work on some other projects. Moving on, I began my second semester working on 2 different projects, with one being primarily modeled in ZBrush and the other in Maya. Doing 2 projects at once gave me the opportunity to gain more experience in 2 different softwares simultaneously. For ZBrush, I decided to model an angel statue. I had 2 main reasons for choosing this. Firstly, I wanted to gain more practice with digital sculpting in ZBrush. The second reason is that I wanted to gain more experience modeling human anatomy, and an angel statue would allow me to do this while still keeping the focus of my work on environment modeling. Style-wise, I wanted the model to resemble the angel statues one might find in a cemetery. I decided to go with a Gothic-style cemetery angel statue, as once the model is finished, I'm planning on putting it in a scene with the mausoleum I modeled last year. As for the Maya project, I've wanted to model an instrument of some kind for a while now. And I took inspiration from an audio drama horror series called The Magnus Archives, in which there appears a calliope organ. Like that. The model I've made is based on old calliophone circus organ pianos. These organs are smaller than most organ pianos and were primarily chained to carriages. They had to be portable, which is why they were smaller. These organs were generally painted red and had gold pipes coming out from the top, something I made sure to incorporate into my model. I wanted the appearance to resemble antique calliopes. So instead of a metal body like most modern calliopes, I went with a worn, varnished body and added some grime and dirt to the textures to really convey the age. In the near future, I am planning on modeling a carriage for the organ to be chained to, which I think will really sell the traveling circus aesthetic that I am aiming for. I believe that taking a break from the Witch's Hut to work on these 2 projects has been a great decision, as working on these models has allowed me to improve my modeling skills a lot. While modeling the calliope organ, I've learned a lot about how to optimize a model's topology for use in video games. For the angel statue, I've been able to improve my digital sculpting skills, especially in regards to sculpting anatomy. The experience I've gained from working on the calliope organ will help me out tremendously when working on the Witch's Hut, because I will be able to drastically improve the topology of the models in the scene. I believe that the experience I've gained working on the more detailed elements of both the calliope and the angel statue will also allow me to improve the interior models of the Witch's Hut, bringing more life and detail into the overall scene. Bringing things full circle, working on these projects has been a phenomenal and incredibly fulfilling experience. As someone who has always been most drawn to the settings and environments and stories, being able to spend my time creating environmental assets and scenes for video games has been an incredibly rewarding experience, and I look forward to improving my skills even further moving forward. With all of that being said, thank you all so much for listening. All I have left for you now is to show my demo reel. Thank you all so much for your time, and special thanks to all the teachers and all the professors who taught me over the past 4 years.
Hello everyone, my name is Colton Campbell, and today I'm going to be showcasing what I completed in my 4th year. At the start of the school year, I was in full panic mode because I didn't know what I wanted to specialize in for the year. I was in my own head about what I would enjoy doing, what I'm capable of doing, and I was terrified of biting off more than I could chew. In my heart, I knew I wanted to use VFX and compositing to create cool sequences, but I was afraid of failure. Not believing in myself was blocking me from committing. But then I remembered something that helped me apply to come to school here in pursuit of this degree in the first place, and that's taking a leap of faith. Going after something despite being uncomfortable about it and pushing yourself to improve. Remembering this gave me the confidence to push myself to create something I could truly be proud of and to improve my skills in softwares like Houdini and Nuke. So that's how I decided to focus on VFX and compositing. Now, I'll show my 4th year demo reel, which features each project I completed this year, and then I'll talk about what went into making them and how I was able to create the final product. My first project of the year, I wanted to make a superhero landing shot where I would animate a 3D character falling from the sky, then landing in a classic superhero pose and comping in VFX to sell the impact. My workflow for this project had me start in Maya, where I did the character animation using a scene from Deadpool as my reference. Then I did the camera animation and built the scene. From there, I exported both the camera and animation into Houdini, where the majority of my project was spent. Houdini was quite a challenge for me, because for this project, I had to learn how to do a few things I hadn't had a lot of experience with previously. However, it was good for me to troubleshoot and challenge myself. To start the VFX work, I did an RBD ground destruction simulation, used its cache to get the small debris using a source from points node, and then instancing little geometry to the points. I also used the same points as a source for my pyrosim to get the dust that kicks straight up on the landing, and added onto it with a pyro shockwave simulation to sell the impact. The next challenge was rendering. I chose to render everything in their own layers to give me maximum control and comp. However, I had originally planned to render out the ground destruction and then roto the rig so the debris that explodes in front of him shows, giving it depth. This took up a lot of frustrating time, where I tried to hand roto, and I even tried AI-based roto tools, both in Nuke and After Effects, and none of it was working. That's when I had the idea of going back to Houdini and seeing if there was a way to render the ground destruction simulation with the parts that would be covered by the rig in the 3D space, blocking out where he would be, but keeping it transparent for easy compositing. This helped me tremendously and made it so the compositing in Nuke was super easy to finish up the project and essentially created a mask. I'm very happy with this project, and despite weeks of struggling and troubleshooting, I learned a lot, and this project made me feel a lot more comfortable with using Houdini. I was able to push myself with this project, and because of that, I'm extremely proud of the results. The next project I did was a fireball simulation that I paired with a character animation using a wizard rig to create a fireball spell animation. I started with a fireball, which was a simple setup using a sphere as a source for the pyro simulation, and then animating it to make it have turbulence on the flames. I then took a pre-animated wizard rig I found online to test how the fireballs would look if they were animated in Houdini to follow the wizard's hands. After using that test to figure out what worked and what didn't, I animated the wizard myself in Maya so I could get that big activation movement I envisioned. I then exported that animation into Houdini as an Alembic cache, where I used my knowledge from the tests to quickly and painlessly animate the fireballs to activate when I wanted and follows hands throughout the animation. To give a little bit of mood for the animation, I added a background and textured it in the Houdini Karma renderer using some textures from Polyhaven. I decided to render both the fireball and wizard together because the pyro simulation was rendered as a light source, so you can actually see the fire reacting with his hands. I was very happy with how this project turned out. The next project I did was a CG integration project where I filmed myself in my living room on a tripod, laying on the couch trying to move a TV remote into my hand using telekinesis. First, I found a 3D asset to animate that looked just like my TV remote I have at home. I took that into Maya, where I also took my footage, and from there I was able to animate the remote in a way that when I render it, it'll be in perfect placement to composite it into my footage. Lighting took a little longer than I expected. I was very picky about the lighting because I wanted to make sure it looked like it truly belonged in my living room. But after getting it lit properly, I rendered the remote animation out of Maya, and from there I went into Nuke. I set up a relatively simple node tree to combine the footage and the remote animation, and then cleaned up the remote's alpha and added a color grade. The next thing I set up was a basic reflection in the TV screen. To do this, I inverted a second read of the remote animation, then I utilized a roto to keep that inverted remote inside the TV screen. I also used a blur node and a grade node to get it to match the distortion of the screen reflection. I then did this again with the shadow on the TV stand, but with a more intense grade, higher blur, and lowered opacity. After getting the scene and all basic compositing done, I realized that the match cut was very noticeable because I'm a bad actor and my pose didn't match. So, as a quick fix to distract from the poor cut, I added some camera movement with a heavy enough motion blur that it hides the cut a little bit better. This project was incredibly personal and fun for me. Growing up, I was a huge Star Wars fan and always used to wish that I could use the Force, and even used to try every once in a while just to make sure I still wasn't Force sensitive. So this was a cool project to make a childhood dream come true using the skills that I learned in college. The last project I completed is an animated 3D word mark that utilizes particle simulation in Houdini. I wanted to create something that could be used as an advertisement for a brand. For creating this, my workflow was starting with a 3D word mark in Houdini, then creating a particle simulation sourced from the word mark. After doing that, I gave the particles turbulence, constricted to the shape of the word mark, and then gave them a trail node to get lines as opposed to singular particles. After that, most of the simulation work was completed, and it came down to figuring out how to render the particle simulation, and that was relatively simple. After rendering it, it didn't quite pop the way I wanted it to. So I brought it into After Effects, where I keyed out everything but the animated streaks and gave them a higher bloom and saturation and darkened the background to make the streaks have more illumination, thus finishing the project. I'm proud of all the progress I was able to make this year and how comfortable I was able to get with different softwares such as Houdini and After Effects. I'm glad I took the leap of faith. Before getting into this degree, I never would have imagined I'd be able to do half the things I now know how to do. I'm also very thankful to have been able to meet so many amazing people throughout the last 4 years, and would like to say thank you to all of my instructors and classmates that helped me get to this point. Thank you all for your attention, and have a good night.
You know, I normally consider myself fairly eloquent, but all I can really say right now is, wow, that was some incredible work. Absolutely breathtaking. Students, congratulations again. That is some amazing work that we've seen tonight. I also want to commend you on your presentation skills as well. It's always a little bit concerning. You stick someone in front of a computer for 4 years. What's going to happen when they get up here, where in the audience, I can't see anything. I'm just blinded by these two lights here. You know there's an audience out there. Peter assures me there's tens of thousands of people watching online. You know, it's a bit nerve-wracking. You came up here and you nailed it. You showed us your work. You did it with confidence. Congratulations. It was really a fantastic evening. My favorite part, I think, is listening to all of you talk about your journey, where you started, where you hope to go, your successes, your failures. That kind of reflection that we saw tonight, that's how we grow as individuals. That's how you're going to grow as professionals. I hope you'll keep doing that as you move forward in your careers. Your journey here at RDP might be ending, but you're embarking on what might be a scarier, but I think even more exciting part of your journey. And I, for one, hope you'll let us know how it goes, because I'm so excited to see where you all wind up, where this journey goes for all of you. Based on what I've seen tonight, I have no concerns of the success you are all going to see in industry, in the workforce, in doing what it is you're clearly so passionate about. That passion was in full display tonight. And I hope you keep that passion moving forward. I'll thank a few people as we wrap this up. First, I want to thank the faculty, the staff who've supported these learners on their journey. It's not just about the classroom hours, it's about all of the work that comes in supporting them, the after hours, the emails, the frantic moments, the moments of failure, the moments of success. Thank you, faculty, for all the work you do in supporting our learners. I want to thank everyone that's here in the audience, that's watching at home, friends, family, supporters, colleagues. I know what it's like to be in school for a long time, working hard. You can't do it without support. You can't do it with people around you who are cheering you on, who are taking care of you, who are providing you those words of encouragement. So friends, family members who are here tonight, who are watching, on behalf of our learners, thank you so much for that support. You know, most of them expressed it themselves. I'm sure they are deeply grateful for all that you have done for them and for allowing them to be here tonight showing us their amazing work. Lastly, I want to thank the staff here at the Arts Center, the technical staff who have helped us put on this wonderful show tonight. Without them, we could not be here. We couldn't do this wonderful presentation that we've done tonight. So once again, on behalf of RDP, thank you for coming out tonight. Thank you for supporting our learners. And let's give one final round of applause for the amazing presentations that we've seen this evening. All right, thank you, and have a wonderful rest of your evening.